there is a huge emotional component to leading in uncertainty. And for that, I want to use a really concrete and well-studied example. You may or may not have heard of Admiral Jim Stockdale. Retired Admiral Jim was the highest ranking officer in the Hanoi Hilton. He was shot down over Vietnam during the Vietnam War, 1965. And he spent 8 years in incarceration. He was tortured over 20 times. And he was clearly uncertain about whether he would be released, whether he would survive, whether he would face his family again. But as the highest ranking military officer, he shouldered the burden of command. The Vietnamese wanted to wheel him out and demonstrate him as a PR coup, as a political coup against the Americans. And he beat his own face up with a chair and a knife so that he could not be used for propaganda. He was interviewed by Jim Collins prior to Jim's book, Good to Great. And whilst Jim and he were taking a walk, he asked Admiral Stockdale, who didn't make it? You did make it, right? 8 years in captivity. Who didn't make it? And Admiral Stockdale said, oh, that's easy. The optimists. And Jim was a little taken back by them because obviously the prevailing viewpoint, the mindset is that optimism is good. But Stockdale explained. He said the optimists would say, oh, we'll be out by Christmas. And then when Christmas came and went, they'd say, oh, we'll be out by Easter. And then Easter came and went, and they said, we'll be out by Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving came and went, and Christmas came around again. And they died of a broken heart. So an interesting paradox is that optimism is not actually what you want in times of uncertainty. You see, you must never confuse the faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with a discipline to face, to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. And so if you've read Good to Great, there's a nice section here on Jim Collins' interview with Admiral Stockdale. And Jim also looks at companies and has particular case studies of companies where they were sort of really optimistic about how things would be, and companies where they faced the reality. And it's been interesting as I've been coaching leaders through this current crisis, those that are able to articulate the tough message. So Jim Collins coined this the Stockdale Paradox. And the paradox is this, that you must retain faith that you will prevail in the end, regardless of the difficulties. And at the same time, confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be. So the paradox is the ability to hold these two things in mind and to communicate these two things. Here's another example. Dr. Viktor Frankl, who also was incarcerated during the Second World War as a Jew by the Nazis. And he said the last of all human freedoms is the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given circumstances. And he also said that, if circumstances won't change, we will have to change ourselves. Now, this is what I've been speaking about in terms of self-leadership. That self-leadership is the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions to achieve your objectives. So I was strongly influenced in my writing on my 2 books on self-leadership by Dr. Viktor Frankl, by the concept of locus of control, which was researched by Deci is that we can control our thoughts, feelings, and actions towards our objectives. But we need to be able to manage ourselves in this period of uncertainty, not to be paralyzed by fear or reactive and anxious.